It's Sunday, and the NFL Combine is this week. In fact, a number of people are already in Indianapolis for the events that will take place tomorrow and then really intensify on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday through Sunday. On those days, you'll see a number of players get up on podiums and be interviewed by members of the media, and it will be their first time being introduced to people recording what they have to say. And they'll have different questions, but they'll all surround the basic question of, are you good enough to play this game at the NFL level? None of them will ask questions such as, do you have a plan for when you get injured? What will you do for the case of having multiple injuries? Do you have a financial advisor? And other really important questions that really shed a light, at least one light, on what happened to Minnesota Vikings player Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore committed suicide 2 days ago, and he was injured this year for the fourth time in his NFL history. Rondale Moore came into the NFL through the NFL Combine in 2021, where he was judged to be, quote, an average player, even though he ran a 4.2840. He had a number of heroics for Purdue, particularly against Ohio State. He was on his way to making his mark. But for reasons best known to Moore, the pressure of whatever was going on in his head, undoubtedly due to injury, was too much for him, and he didn't feel he could cope anymore. We hear more often than not about people of his age. It doesn't matter if they're NFL players or actors or skiers or teachers. They often complain of not being able to talk to people, of being lonely, because they're a generation that has been, for all practical purposes, raised on the internet. That's not a good thing. And the question is, what is the NFL doing to recognize this problem among its players and provide the necessary mitigation efforts, whatever they are? And right now, the answer doesn't seem to be a thing. I can say that the NFL recognizes the problem because they mention it in their commercials about nonprofits that they help support that look at this matter. But what about having specific response mechanisms for players who are in mental distress before they take their lives? What about having a checklist that a person can quickly go through to see if a person on social media is expressing the signs that that indeed person may indeed take their life? What's happening? The National Football League seems to like to take a hands-off position whenever something bad happens to one of its players. Players accused of rape, NFL's hands off, even if the player is innocent. Now, individual teams have different responses. For example, with Galeon Conley, who was accused of rape when he was entering the NFL draft, if memory serves, in 2010, the Oakland Raiders went to bat for him and did a little research and decided those accusations were false. They drafted him in the first round, and he went on to have a very successful NFL career by all accounts after an incredible run at Ohio State. Those allegations went by the wayside, and that was that. But that was the Raiders. How come that's not the NFL norm? How come we don't see the NFL going to bat for each and every player that comes into its fold? You would say it's too expensive? Well, how do you know? Considering the amount of money the NFL takes in, wouldn't it be a great investment just not to have that kind of action happening in society that can be pointed to the National Football League? I think so, and I think a number of other people think so too. This is something to think about as you watch the next crop of stars, which will be trotted out just as that by the NFL, appear in the various halls and ballrooms and interview rooms that are used for the NFL Combine this week. We have to start thinking about the future of these young men, even if they haven't thought about their future beyond what team they may go to, and then, of course, how much they're going to make, which gets to this other mention. Name, image, and likeness can be a savior for young men coming out of college and into the NFL who are concerned about the amount of money they have if they get an injury. Many of the players that are coming in that are on the top tier are gaining between $1 million and $4 million and as much as $5 million in their name, image, and likeness deals. That's great. They should have a way to bank that money, and also the NFL should want to match that money so that those players can have some type of insurance. And perhaps even the NFL should engineer some kind of way of early rewarding players that come in who are name, image, and likeness recipients so that some of that money is saved in case they need it should they get injured. And then the NFL should work to build a pool that applies to every single player that is within its fold on any given year. Because a number of players that pound their fists when they get injured, beating the turf, they're doing so not just because they are injured, not just because they won't play for a while, but also because they simply won't get paid. That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. So, again, when you look at the NFL Combine every day this week, and many of you will, think about these players and ask yourself the question, do they have enough money to survive multiple injuries? And how do we make sure they have enough money? And how can financial advisors play a role without milking these young men for money, just acting as consultants? Perhaps there should be a nonprofit that includes financial advisors that's specifically formed to help these and other similar players in different walks of life among professional athletes. This is a big problem. It needs a big solution. No one should feel that killing themselves is the last resort. If you know of anyone who you believe is in that situation, immediately contact the suicide hotline before it's too late. Ask them if they need help before it's too late. Don't wait for them to say something to you. You ask them. If your spider sense is telling you that something is wrong, speak. Subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube and bookmark NFL News by Zenny62.com.